Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I am Councillor John Ward, leader of Babergh District Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And finally, we'll be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please can members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. So I'd now like to move to the agenda, please. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Gould.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members.
Chairman.
Councillor Arthey.
With regard to the seal paper later on, which I present, I have an interest to declare as Chairman of Lindsay Parish Council. One of the applications is in Lindsay Parish, and of course Lindsay Parish Council are a consultee.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on. Oh, sorry, Councillor Malvisi. No. Right, moving on. Item 3, paper BCA 2228, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of October 2022. I'll just go through those page by page. This is on your modern.gov app, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. If there are no questions or comments, then please may I have a proposer? Councillor Osborne. And seconder, Councillor Busby. Thank you. Moving on. Oh gosh, we need to vote. Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress on the app. Councillor McCraw?
I can't log on to the voting, so I'll have to vote manually in favour.
In favour, thank you. Councillor Malvisi? Oh, you've just come through now, thank you very much. So, Chair, that is 7 votes for.
Thank you. Yep, 7. Yep, thank you. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Do any members of the Cabinet have any questions over this? The only thing I'd like to point out at this stage is we do have a council meeting scheduled for the 22nd of November. There's nothing showing in the list at the moment for that meeting because papers haven't been prepared yet, but keep an eye out in the next week or so. Councillor McCraw.
Does that indicate it's possible it will be cancelled, or that we're not ready with the agenda?
There's a possibility, but I hope not, because there are a number of things which I think we do need to include on that for a council meeting before Christmas. So if there are no further comments, then Moving on to item 8, paper BCA 2229, the Tenant Engagement Strategy. And I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce this report. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce report BCA 2229, which outlines our proposed approach to tenant engagement within housing, how we plan to develop our tenant engagement opportunities and priorities to enable effective and meaningful engagement with our tenants in the form of our tenant engagement strategy for 22-25. The strategy has been developed with our tenants' insight following our tenant engagement survey exercise, where 1,092 tenants responded to the survey, which I am sure you will agree is a fantastic response rate, and their responses have provided invaluable insight which has informed the development of this strategy. The purpose of the strategy is to ensure our tenants are aware of the available opportunities to be able to hold us to account on performance, influence the way we do things, and be at the centre of our decision-making processes in ways which suit them. As part of our requirement to comply with the Tenant Involvement and Empowerment Standard, one of the consumer standards of the regulator for social housing, and our ambition to have truly tenant-led housing services, we feel that this strategy underpins those commitments and focuses our direction of travel to ensure we have a good tenant-led governance structure in place. Following the adoption of the strategy and its associated delivery plan, work will be undertaken by officers to look at how we can recruit a representative range of tenants to a variety of roles laid out within the strategy, ensuring we are being inclusive in terms of offering engagement and influence opportunities in both physical and virtual settings. Progress of the delivery plan will be monitored by the Tenant Board and portfolio holders for housing, as well as the strategy itself being reviewed at least annually, the results of which will all be reported to all our tenants. I would therefore like to propose recommendations to approve the strategy as in option 1 of the report and ask for a seconder. Myself and David White, Housing Transformation Manager, are happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Malvisi. Thank you. Members of the Cabinet, does anyone have any questions, first of all, before we move into debate? Councillor McCraw and then Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the presentation of the data, sorry, I'm getting hot on data these days. I'm really pleased to see that we've got these online responses and the postal responses, and I was wondered the reasoning behind separating the responses from each other and tabulating them separately. It might have been helpful to have an aggregate score showing, I mean, the relative proportions are 187 online, but the rest, 800 some, are in fact 905 are postal responses. And I wasn't sure if there's any need to distinguish between the responses. I mean, whether the response is received postally or online shouldn't really be affecting the nature of that response. So I just wondered if it would be possible. I would have preferred the data to have been presented en masse, aggregated. I think it might have given a slightly clearer picture. Not that it's unclear, but it could be clearer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your question. I will go to the officer in a moment, but I think you'll find that the reason we have to do this is we have to be sure that we're being compliant with the regulator and the new powers that are coming in place. I don't know if David wants to add to that at all.
Yeah, thanks again for your comments. The reason we chose to lay it out in that way was because we wanted to show that we had considered both both our online respondents and our people that responded by paper, because we wanted to show that actually there isn't much difference in it. So rather than, for transparency purposes, we wanted to show that actually both sets of respondents responded in very similar ways.
It was really just to be able to draw conclusions from, and I apologise if I'm being nitpicky, but hey, that's part of the job.
Councillor Osborne, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to come back on that one, if we find that perhaps we could take your comments on board at a later stage, there's no reason why that we can't do this. This is an evolving document, and we can obviously take that into consideration.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. I have got quite a few questions, so I'm happy to ask one and then somebody else can come in and have a turn.
Well, unless anyone is eager to put their hands up, you can ask all of them now.
Can I? Thank you very much. Very comprehensive paper, and I enjoyed reading it. But as I have an affinity with regulation, looking at the proposed routine inspections every 4 years, what form will that inspection take? Will it be planned or unplanned, and how many people will be in the inspecting team? Or is that too early to be asking that detail? Thank you.
So the regulator can come and inspect anytime they like. The changes to the regulations which are being debated at the moment, actually today in the House of Commons again, means that they used to be able to give us 28 days notice. That will be reduced to 48 hours notice. So it's just to show that, you know, we need to be on the ball all the time. In terms of how that inspection would look, that hasn't been laid out yet, but it will be similar probably to kind of what it was like back in the Audit Commission days. They'll be looking at the consumer standards and the evidence that we need to be gathering now and you know, providing to make sure that when the regulator comes, we can show that each standard and what's expected of us, we've got evidence to back that up, that we've met those standards.
Thank you. Yes, as I was familiar with the Audit Commission days, that's going to be more rigorous than it is now?
Yeah, it's more around they've extended their the remit, so they've got more powers, unlimited fines, you know, all of those sorts of punitive measures as well that they can put in place. That's mostly what and it's going from reactive to proactive. So they'll be doing it. If you're a housing provider, you will be getting an inspection once every 4 years. Obviously, for us, it's 2 sovereign councils, so potentially could be every 2 years. But at the moment, it's reactive, so it's only when they're made aware of an issue or you're self-referred.
My second question is about the Tenants Board. I do have a resident who is actually on it, and I think she's quite a very good member of it. Is there a sort of public list of members of the Tenants Board? And how often is there a change of membership?
I'm not sure about the list. I'll refer to David on that one because I'm not sure of data protection, where we stand with that one, so I'm not too sure. In regards to your second question regarding how often do they sit as and when it's required. If a paper's coming forward or there's a policy that we need their views on, then obviously they will sit. At the moment, the membership is quite small, but we're working hard to improve that membership, as well as get a more representation sitting on it. Especially, the problem is getting younger people to sit on it in their sort of late 20s, I suppose, early 30s. They're the ones that we really need to target a little bit more. The older ones tend to be quite forthcoming on sitting on it. But yeah, so we'll be working hard on that one.
Is there a sort of recognised change of, you know, is there, however I know they sort of volunteer, but is there a routine change of membership?
Yeah, thank you, David.
Yes, thanks. So the Tenant Board is, as part of the work to do with the strategy, we need to, we've developed a role profile, so very much like a job description, as it were. The problem we've got with the Tenant Board at the moment is they're both being used as a consultative body and a scrutiny body, and the tenant engagement experts are basically saying that that's not the right way of doing it. You should have a consultative body and a separate scrutiny body. So we need to develop the Tenant Board, either the current board that we've got, or as Councillor Osborne has mentioned, encouraging new members through, that will, and with their sole purpose of being our scrutiny function. So they won't be there to consult on policies and things like that. We've got other groups that can do that. So yes, they're there to hold us to account on our performance with the regulations. But at the moment, you know, as I say, the next stage is to develop those, develop the terms of reference for the group, develop the group itself to make sure we've got the right skills in place.
That actually sounds like a good development. Thank you for the My Home bulletin. Can you just, I read the papers, but I wasn't clear. It says it will be updated online, and then if I, as a resident, am not digitally competent, I could get an annual sort of report. How often online would it be put out?
So our My Home Bulletin was introduced on the back of our 2019 tenant satisfaction survey, where residents said that they didn't feel that we communicated with them very well or frequently enough. So we introduced the My Home Bulletin, which is a monthly bulletin, and it is sent to 4,600 tenants who we hold email addresses for every single month. We can also use it to send out sort of short, sharp messages that we want. For example, we had over last week, we had some bogus callers, so we wanted to put that out there to make sure that residents knew about that. In the future, yes, we want to be able to develop it, but we're very mindful that it's only going to 4,500 tenants, so we wanted to do an overall one that could be available in a physical format as requested. We probably won't send it out as a matter of course because of the associated costs with that, but if it's requested, we will be able to do that.
Yes, because that was what I was actually looking at. There'd be a disparity between those that are not online and those that actually can receive, and that to me was a bit unfair if I was as a resident, if I was disadvantaged by waiting for, and I can accept that the cost of the postage and that would be phenomenal, really. Thank you. The dashboard, it's just a comment. I have got very good eyesight because I had my eyes done a long time ago, but the dark colour on the headings sort of obliterated the typing a bit. If somebody could sort of just look at that, the dark red, you couldn't see the type at all. And so I know you know what a lot of work it entailed, but it would be helpful if the colours were just a bit lighter. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we will do that. I was having the same problem myself, so I do. Can I just, the point that you raised earlier in the previous question was about those that haven't got access to IT and those that have. And we're very, very keen to make sure that they're not left out of any consultation or engagement that we do. So it's very much part of all the process that we will do to make sure that it's fair across those that have got the internet, those that haven't, those that have that can't use it, as well as those that have. So that is very much in our minds to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity.
I think I'm very, thank you, John. I think I'm very aware that we've got residents now within the cost of living crisis who actually, some of them are going to come offline because of the expense of whatever. And that group might increase actually more than it is at the moment. But thank you, David. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions before we move into debate? In which case, we'll move into cabinet debate. Just before anyone makes any comments, if they wish to, you'll see that the paper that we've got references the social housing white paper. Well, there's now legislation going through Parliament, just in case members are unaware, as a result of that, and this engagement strategy links in very well with that, because that's going to give tenants greater powers and ensure that they have better access to what was deemed swift and fair redress, and also the regulator of social housing is going to have greater powers, particularly around ensuring that serious issues regarding repairs and maintenance are resolved a lot more rapidly. So that's all to be welcome for our tenants, and hopefully this engagement strategy will ensure that we we understand from the tenants themselves exactly what they expect from the service we're providing. And I think that what we've got here is a very good document, and we'd be very happy to support it. But does anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Malvisi.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, it's a very good document, and hopefully it will assist Babergh in managing antisocial behaviour, which is a blight on social housing.
It is, and it's certainly one of the things that has clearly came back as a result of the survey has been of significant importance to our residents. Thankfully, it's not.
It gives the tenants, those who aren't antisocial, I think it gives them a sense of somebody's caring, somebody's concerned about our home.
It's not ubiquitous all over the district, but there are pockets, and some of the issues are very complex and do require a significant and time-consuming multi-agency response. But yes, we are fully aware that that's something that hopefully we'll be able to improve and ensure that the response is a lot better, and we reduce the instances of it. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thinking this will be the last word on this report. So, you know, although we were already very positive in the work that we were doing in regards to engagement with our tenants, we were already doing it, but this strategy just strengthens that what we're already doing and ensures that we're compliant with the regulator. But we have a very good tenant board. They're very up for engaging with us at the moment, and as I said before, we really need to get more members to get involved into the engagement, and we're working on that. In regards to the comment about antisocial behaviour, it won't solve it completely, I have to say. I don't want to raise people's expectations and members of the public that be listening into this. It will not resolve antisocial behaviour, but it will give our tenants more of a say in what we do in regards to how we deal with that actual issue. Can I take this opportunity to thank all the officers involved for a brilliant strategy. You had to put it together fairly quickly, and I think it's a very good piece of work, and I'm sure it will stand us in good stead when the regulator does do an inspection. So well done to all the officers involved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Busby.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just slightly concerned that we're having a tenant board that are going to be telling us what our managers already ought to know, where our performance is lacking, where we're not hitting the targets that we've set. Why should we have to rely on tenants doing that? Surely, if you've got the management in the right place, and the workers, they will know exactly what's going on.
Councillor Osborne, would you like to respond to that?
I did think I'd have the last word, but knowing David, I know that's not possible. Yeah, I find this question a bit strange, actually, because, yeah, we do monitor our performance. Of course we monitor the performance, but this is all about engaging the tenants in that performance and giving them ownership of that performance. So I have a bit of a problem in trying to understand where you're coming from on that one, Councillor Busby. Perhaps you'd like to explain a bit more.
Well, I don't think the tenant should have the ownership of our performance. I think that should be down to our management and the cabinet.
I think you'll find our tenants will disagree with you on that one, David, and it's very clearly has come out in the surveys that they want to take ownership of our performance. They want to be involved in our performance. So I don't think the tenants would agree with you on that one. And this is all about our tenants. This is about listening to our tenants, hearing what they've got to say to us and actually acting on it, and that's what we're doing.
I'd just say that if we were doing things 100% right and on time, would the tenants feel the need to have a tenants board, or would they feel satisfied? Is it only because we're not delivering the performance that tenants want that we're having to have this tenants board?
No, it's not. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. No, it's not. This is about, and we're never going to be perfect. There's always room for improvement. So let the tenants have the opportunity to tell us where they feel that improvement's coming from. Of course, we'd like to reach 100%, but that's quite unrealistic. We're never going to get there.
Can I bring Councillor McCraw in? I think he probably has a few things he'd like to say in response?
I'm just looking at this. Why would we not want the tenants to be able to express themselves? Why would we not want to get experienced tenants? And I remember that you mentioned the member of the tenants board mentioned in the papers. That person is known to me and has been a member of previous tenants boards in their other incarnations. But the more important thing, I think, here is that this is complying with an approach that's being made through central government and also including the Ombudsman. And I look at the diagram at the bottom of page 12 of the main paper, the introductory paper, and it's fairly clear that this isn't a matter of people owning or not owning. It's that, yes, we own the properties and we own the job, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't take input from elsewhere. And I can assure you that if we don't take input from elsewhere, you're going to get it, because we get it in our wards. I know. Wander around the village and people are always asking me questions on the nature of their tenancy, and sometimes I can help them, sometimes I can't. But generally speaking, why would we not want to listen to them?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McCraw. Any other comments? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I see, on a similar vein to Councillor McCraw, any public service always needs the views of the people that use that service. It doesn't matter which service we're talking about across the country. Even in something like private businesses, you actually engage with the people who are receiving the service to get their views, and I think it's important to engage the residents. I think they have a lot to offer, actually, in contribution to what we do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Councillor McLaren. Councillor McCraw.
Just to summarise, it's not passing the buck, which I think is the sort of implication, or denying responsibility and ownership. It's sharing the load. Nothing wrong with that.
Thank you. Councillor Busby, are you convinced now?
I just believe it's better to do than to listen.
Yeah.
I may be wrong.
We'll still be doing. Okay, any other comments? If not, then I think it's probably time we move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. Councillor McCraw, may I take your vote?
In favour.
Thank you. Chair, that's 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. And moving on, item 9, paper BCA 2230, Community Infrastructure Levy, the Civil Expenditure Programme for November 2022. Before I ask the Cabinet Member for Planning to introduce the report, I'd just like to introduce two guests today in relation to item 3, the befriending scheme. I've got Shirley Moore, the Chief Executive, and I also have Francis Torrington. And welcome to our meeting today. Councillor Arthey.
Thank you, Chair. There are, as you said, 3 seal bids for Cabinet to decide today. The Cabinet decisions affect the parishes of Great Waldingfield, Great Cornard and Lindsay. Firstly, B2208 in Great Waldingfield, which is the upgrade of parking facilities at the Village Hall, and the seal bid is for £30,824.92 from the ring-fenced infrastructure fund. Seal ask on this project is 75% of the project costs. The project will increase the number of parking spaces by 10, all inside the Village Hall boundary, providing dedicated disabled parking spaces to help improve the access to the building and potentially increase the level of use and number of bookings and activities. By increasing the size of the car park and clearly marking out parking spaces, more cars will be able to park on site and reduce the need for Village Hall users to park on the road, and also reduce the level of disruption to residents and other road users. The Village Hall already has dedicated EV charger spaces. You will see in your papers that Councillor Maybury has submitted some comments on the seal bid. including that the application states support from the Braithwaite Allotment Trust. She has said that neither she, the Secretary, nor the Chairman, as trustees of the Trust, have been consulted. She goes on to say extending the car park onto the grassed area of the village hall restricts outdoor activities at the site, which Babergh are currently encouraging, and that the grass acts as a natural buffer and sound reducer. She would prefer a sustainable grassed car park with a honeycomb type of hard standing between which grass could be grown and which would support wildlife when not in use. These concerns have been discussed with her, along with an issue she raised concerning underground heating pipes under the grass where the car park would go. These pipes are dug into the ground by 1 metre and would not affect the laying of a car park. Officers have also checked, and a paragraph of support has been received from the Braithwaite Allotment Trust. Chairman, to conclude, the scheme is an oven-ready scheme with support from 5 local bodies: Great Waldingfield Parish Council, the Neighbourhood Steering Group, Slimming World, the Great Waldingfield Horticultural Society, and Suffolk County Council Plug-in Suffolk. It also has my support and the support of the Braithwaite Trust. Collaborative funding will be provided by Great Waldingfield Village Hall Management Committee. It is recommended to Cabinet and is the first bid that I'm proposing to you today. Chairman, moving to B2207 in Great Cornard. Again, a car park. It's the upgrade of parking facilities at the Great Cornard Allotment Car Park. It's a SIL bid of £55,927.50 from the Local Infrastructure Fund. The SIL ask here is 75% of the project costs. The project involves installing a new, level, tarmacked / hard surface and improved drainage system within the car park. The potential for accidents and injuries from trips and falls as a result of the uneven surfaces and potholes should be greatly reduced for all car park users. A hard surface with clearly marked parking bays will also reduce any potential damage to vehicles. By extending the boundary of the car park and clearly marking out parking spaces, the capacity of the car park will be increased by 20 to 25%. As existing, it's estimated there are 12 to 15 spaces, dependent on potholes and flooding, they say. So presumably people are parking around the potholes and puddles. So the increase would be to about 20, maybe 25 spaces. This car park lies in close proximity to the allotments, the Gainsborough Trail, the country park, and existing sports facilities, so will benefit many users. The scheme again is an oven-ready scheme with community support and collaborative funding being provided by Great Cornard Parish Council. It is recommended to Cabinet and is the second bid I'm proposing for your approval today. The third and final bid for you to consider today is B2209 in Lindsay, which is the befriending scheme Red Rose Friends Community Farm. It's a SIL bid of £100,000, which is our new maximum amount for community projects, and it would be from the Local Infrastructure Fund. SIL ask is 70.4% of the total project costs of £141,981.59. Chairman, before outlining the case, please can Shirley Moore, the Chief Executive of the Befriending Scheme, who you introduced earlier, can she please give a 5-minute presentation on the Befriending Scheme so Cabinet members will more clearly understand how the scheme works?
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Yes, of course. And Shirley, if you'd like to speak now, that would be a great help to give further background for Cabinet members. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm delighted to talk about my charity, the Befriending Scheme. We've been in existence for 33 years, starting off in Sudbury and now extending our services to the whole of Suffolk. We provided a one-to-one befriending scheme and run a number of community hubs all over Suffolk. In the last few years, we've developed our services. So initially, we were working simply with adults with a learning disability. but for about the last 10 years we've extended our remit, and we now work with a lot of people who are suffering ill mental health, with vulnerable families, with military families, with older people. About 5 years ago, we initiated a project working with Otley College. What I should say is that throughout our existence, we've always talked to our users and asked them what would be most beneficial to them, what kind of services could we provide that would give them the most help. And eventually, overwhelmingly, lots of our members lots of them wanted to have jobs, wanted to have a purpose for getting up in the morning. And we kind of hit on, when we drilled that down, what was really quite popular was the idea of working outside, working with animals, working on the land. So hence the idea of a community farm arose. And we initially set up with Otley College, who were very keen for us to come onto their campus and start a pilot there, which we did quite successfully, until eventually Otley College were taken over and they no longer had that facility available. From then, because we knew how well it had worked, we wanted to set up another farm, which we did in Assington about 3.5, 4 years ago. That has been such a huge success in terms of the services and the benefit that we've been able to provide for a whole range of people. As I said, our main client group is adults with a learning disability, but more and more we've been working with people who are suffering from ill mental health. We have, for example, a project called Mindful Mondays, where we are providing a service for ladies particularly who've been struggling and haven't been able to get enough benefit from the National Health Service, from the IDT, and actually Frances, who's my deputy chair, she volunteers at our Mindful Mondays. So if you'd like any case studies for particularly how we've benefited some people, I'm sure Frances would be happy to elaborate. The care farm in Assington was amazing, still is amazing. We are still there. We're in the process of moving right now. We had originally thought that if the farm was a success, that we could have had some additional land in Assington, but that didn't happen. And because we were so successful, we really wanted to find bigger premises where we could provide more services for more people. So I did note that there was something about that maybe we technically failed in Assington, and I genuinely don't think we have. I think that the benefit that we've been able to provide for the local community has been immense. I don't know if that gives you a flavour of the befriending scheme and the kind of services that we provide, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Shirley. I'll let Councillor Arthey finish his introduction, and then when we come to questions, I'm sure there will be some for you. But thank you for that. That's very helpful. Councillor Arthey.
Do you want me to continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, thank you, Shirley, for that, and thank you, Chairman, for allowing Shirley to come and talk to us today. This is a unique SIL bid in that this befriending scheme proposal is one that Babergh funded through SIL in Assington previously for £26,043, with approximately £12,000 of communities grant. The scheme started in 2019, and the SIL/communities money was paid out to support the venture. But the relationship between the operator and the farmer who gave them a lease has since completely broken down. He has terminated the lease, and we understand it has only a few weeks left to run. The reasons for this breakdown have not been formally stated, and it has been difficult to pinpoint reasons. The befriending scheme have secured a new lease at a farm in Lindsay and have applied for further SIL funding of £100,000 for a total project start-up cost of £141,000. Their intention is to move the operation to Lindsay, and they have plans to expand the operation, including education elements. All the checks and balances for this new seal bid have been undertaken by Christine and her team. And the scheme meets the framework requirements with all the necessary evidence for costings as a seal bid. However, there are confidence and longevity issues around the operation, given that the site at Assington has effectively failed, and this is a second request for investment from SIL for a relaunch of the venture at Lindsay, and I will cover these details later. Although planning permission has been granted for the befriending scheme use in Lindsay, there were local objections on highway and traffic grounds, which were looked at by Highways, and ultimately the use was accepted. Consultation has occurred on this seal bid and brought forward objections from the parish. They are supportive of the change of use, but objections raised to the siting of the porter cabins and the storage containers due to their appearance and impact on the landscape. Concerns also raised in terms of impact on highway safety, given the increase in vehicle movements along a classified road, which is narrow. The ward member, Councillor Jameson, is undecided. These localised objections are important and should be given weight in any decision, but it is important to recognise that this befriending scheme would have wider benefits for Babergh residents and users of the facility, as there are no other such schemes across the whole of the Babergh district. It has been a very difficult situation upon which our officers have based a recommendation. The earlier SIL investment has to some extent been safeguarded by the proposed transfer of the porter cabin and fencing from Assington to Lindsay. But similar circumstances of this SIL bid also relate to the SIL bid in Assington if they are compared. In Lindsay, the land is leased for 25 years with a first break clause at year 5, which is the same arrangement as the land at Assington, and the minimum we require for provision of permanent infrastructure. SIL costs are greater for the start-up at Lindsay than compared with Assington, with £100,000 being sought compared to £26,000 previously. Accounts have been requested for Assington from the operator, but they are not available as the only accounts that are accessible are for the befriending scheme in totality. Our officers have tried to make contact with the farmer who ended the Assington lease to find out why the relationship broke down, but as far as I'm aware, no new information has been forthcoming. Chairman, to conclude, this SIL bid is a second SIL bid for an expansion of a care farm facility and project, together with movement of the facility to a different location at Lindsay. There are localised objections to this bid, but benefits for the wider district. Confidence could be low around longevity, and risks could be argued to be high based on the operation ceasing at Assington. Our SIL team are recommending this bid to you, given the widespread benefits that would accrue to the district by continuing to support the scheme. It is recommended for approval as an exception to the normal approach to SIL bid offer letters by making the recommendation for approval subject to the imposition of a clawback provision, such that if the use fails within 10 years, all the monies are clawed back through a condition on the SIL bid offer letter. Financial accounts show that the general befriending scheme currently have reserves of around £500,000 in their funds to cover this. Our shared legal service have confirmed that this clawback provision is appropriate in the circumstances. And Chairman, the officer recommendation is one of approval. Finally, Chairman, I am proposing approval of the first two bids under 3.1, but given my position as Chairman of Lindsay Parish Council, I am asking you to take bid 3 at Lindsay separately. Chairman, at 3.2, I am also asking Cabinet to note and endorse the SIL Expenditure Programme at Appendix A. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. I'd like for a seconder for the first two bids, please, and Councillor McLaren. We will be discussing and voting on those first two separate from the last one, but I'm prepared to, happy to propose the third bid for the befriending scheme, and I'd like a seconder for that. Councillor Osborne, thank you very much. So first of all, what I'd like to do is to ask members of the Cabinet if you have any questions on either of the first two bids.
Chairman, can I ask if there are questions addressed to Shirley, would you allow her to answer?
Yes, of course. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So just focus on the first two, the two car parks at Great Waldyfield and Great Cornard. Any questions on either of those two? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the one in Cornard, I'm very interested in that because obviously it's one of the starting points for the Gainsborough Trail for anybody to start walking on the Cornard section. That's where they will park their cars. Can we assume that it will be free to park there and there won't be any charges? Is that a criteria for the seal bid, or could they introduce it at a later stage?
Councillor Arthur, yes, please.
Yeah, it applies to all seal bids, other than, if you remember, I think it was the last meeting, you approved that uses such as museums, Gainsborough's house, things like that. In general, we would not allow seal to be spent on something that didn't allow full public access free. Do you remember? We did have a brief discussion on it. So the answer is no, there would be no charge.
Thank you. Any other questions on those first two? And does anyone wish to make any comments in debate on those first two? Or you, Councillor Busby?
Well, it's a question really. Councillor Arthur read some suggestions, recommendations from Councillor Maybury. Will they be taken up or not?
Regarding the type of surface?
Yeah.
No, we're considering the scheme as applied. As I understand it, Councillor Maybury did have a discussion with the SIL team. They addressed, I think, most of her concerns. With regard to her suggestion that perhaps some sort of reinforced plastic mesh could be used rather than a tarmac surface, the applicant has not amended their bid.
Any other comments? Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like a point of clarification, really. Who's going to maintain these two car parks?
Councillor Arthur.
The applicants. So in the case of Great Waldenfield, it will be the Village Hall Committee. In the case of Great Cornard, I'm struggling a bit. I'm guessing it's going to be the Parish Council, but I'm just going to check with Christine Thurlow.
Thank you. It's one of the questions that we ask on our SIL bid application form. You have to put in a maintenance agreement or a plan to look after the investment that is gained through SIL. So I'm thinking that that is the Parish Council because they were the SIL bid author.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, we could perhaps move to the vote on those first two. Sorry, Councillor Oswald.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's just normally you go to other councillors to see if they've got any questions.
Oh. Councillor Hinton, do you have any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Ellsworth, for bringing that up. The only question I've got really is we're talking here about these two applications, an increase in car parking size, whereas at last Cabinet meeting there was a parking strategy put forward, which was also heavily emphasising the reduction in the use of the reliance on the car rather than increasing the use of the car, whereas here we're talking about effectively enabling the increase in the use of the car. Just seems a little bit of a contradiction in terms. I'd like to hear some comments on that.
I can respond with regard to Great Waldenfield, and currently there are people who arrive by car and park on the grass. In the summertime that's not a problem, in the wintertime it makes a mess. They also have situations where they have cars parking out on a busy road so that people can access events at the Village Hall. So I don't think this will increase the use of cars. I think it will have no impact. It may well increase the use of the hall but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody will be arriving by car. The other thing is that they've lost a couple of regular spaces in their car park because they've installed EV charging points. So those are dedicated for EV users.
Councillor
With
Malvisi,
regard to the one at Great Cornard, I have to confess I'm not as familiar with that application. I don't know, I'm looking at Christine Thurlow and she's got her hand on the loudspeaker button, so hopefully she will help you with that one.
Thank you. As some of you will know, Blackhouse Lane, which is the main access to that car park, is very narrow. It is an area which is used not only for the allotments but for the Gainsborough Trail, and then you've got sports uses taking place down Blackhouse Lane where no doubt there are congestion issues. So this is resurfacing and marking out spaces more effectively, which I think will help aid congestion and address live issues from a parking point of view.
The car park can also be used by cycle users, of course.
Councillor Malvisi, did you want to come back on that parking issue?
Yes, Chairman. It's to address the comment that Councillor Hinton made. The parking strategy doesn't actively go against the use of cars. It looked at the allocation of car parks and the best use of car parks, and to allocate parking within car parks that removes parking on grass verges that does damage to our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malvisi. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the corner, just to add to Christine's comments as well, it's not about increasing parking, it's about making the allotments and the walks and the health centre more accessible, because currently in the winter it's a mud bath, so people can't park their cars there to use those services. So it's not about increasing it, it's about making parking easier.
Thank you. Any more from anyone? Okay. We will move to the vote now. Yep, thank you. On the first two items only, the two car parks.
So the vote is now in progress.
Chairman, to be clear, we're taking 3.2 as well, aren't we?
And sorry, and 3.2, as it's written in the
Yes, members are voting on recommendation 3.1, excluding SIL bid B22-09 and recommendation 3.2 as detailed in the report. Councillor McCraw, may I take your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's 7 votes for.
Thank you. Okay then, we're now moving on to the befriending schemes application. You've heard a lot from Councillor Arthey, and you've also heard from Shirley Moore. Planning permission has been granted for this. There were highways issues, but analysis of traffic movements and vehicle volumes were provided, and Suffolk Highways were did accept the data that was provided and felt that the application met all of their criteria for the access to the road. New visibility displays are going to be put in place, and there was no concern from Highways over those traffic volumes. There are a number of other points that Councillor Arthey has raised there, and perhaps you'd like to examine those either through questions or debate. But first of all, I'd like to open it up for Cabinet Member questions, either of Councillor Arthey or indeed of Shirley Moore or Francis Torrington, who are both here. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Shirley. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. Excellent scheme, this one, absolutely excellent. But my question is, how many people do you envisage being able to take advantage of the scheme when it moves over? And how accessible will it be? Because obviously Assendon wasn't that accessible either, and I didn't think it even had a bus route to it. So how do you propose to make this more accessible?
Okay,
So since we started Assington, we have actually got a minibus. So we do pick up our members at the moment at Kingfisher Leisure Centre in Sudbury, and we propose to continue to do that. It's a really good location to be able to bring people to Lindsay. Some of the parent carers will come along and drop their cared for person off with us. We envisage that we'll also be attracting members from Hadley, and I guess because of the rural position, people will be coming in cars, but because we have the minibus, we'll be bringing perhaps the bulk of our members via minibus. So traffic, I know there was a big concern about traffic, but in terms of when the traffic will be there, there'll be 5 or 6 staff, including a minibus driver, over a period of about an hour in the morning, and then again in the late afternoon. So it won't be an all-day traffic in and out. I'm sorry, what was your other question, Jan? Was that about numbers?
Yeah, actually, the transport side of it, obviously highways have looked at it and they're fine with it, and I think the benefits far outweigh the possible minor impact that there'll be on the infrastructure. My other question was, how many people do you envisage over a period, say, of 5 years, being able to take advantage of the facility?
Yeah, okay, so I think that it will be much greater than we have at Assington, because we'll have 2 porter cabins there. By the way, just while I'm talking about porter cabins, what we will be doing, and I think it was perhaps, if not in the SIL bid, then certainly in the planning, that we will timber clad the porter cabin buildings so that they will look more like farm buildings. I'm really keen to make sure that aesthetically they look really good and are in keeping with the surrounding area. So I anticipate that we'll have maybe 25 people a day, but what I'm also hoping is that we'll have certain days for the community, which we weren't able to do at Assington. And I'm also pleased to say that I know there have been some objections from the parish council, but we've already had several people who live in and around Lindsay who'd like to volunteer and are very supportive of the project. So I'm heartened by that, at least, that it's not the whole of Lindsay who are perhaps raising lots of concerns.
While I'm just
Chairman, if I could
sorry, first of all, I think Councillor Arthur wanted to
Well, if I could just add to that, I'm not quite sure whether it covers Councillor Osborne's question, but I think it does. On the application form, there's a question about the number of users, and so the response that was in the application form is that the befriending scheme itself will have 75 users a week. The local special schools, including Hillside and, I don't know if I pronounced this properly, Dashcroft, is it? Douchecroft, is it? Douchecroft. It's a bit like bouquet and bucket, isn't it? Douchecroft is 30 pupils per month. Local schools, 4 class visits per year. Local residents and volunteers, 15 to 20 per week. And community groups, Beavers, Browns and Scouts, is down as several pack visits throughout the year. And then we've got SEND students, 10 per week. Okay, so those are the numbers that were put in as the proposal, if you like, for the expansion of the facility. Does that help?
Yes.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and my mind's going round and round and round, and I'm thinking people with mental health problems, you also help them as well. Will you be taking on referrals from organisations, for example, the Kurnos Centre in Sudbury? Will you be able to, because it sounds like you're going to have an awful lot of people passing through your doors, but will you be in a position to be able to take referrals from people that have got mental health problems as well?
We will. Indeed we will, yes. We're already in contact with Jason Joseph and with the IDT in Bury St Edmunds, and in fact the Mindful Mondays project that I was talking about earlier, those were referrals from the IDT who couldn't provide what those ladies needed. So yes, it's a long-winded way of saying yes, we certainly will.
Do you expect to have people coming from Stowmarket now that if you move to Lindsay, you'll be a lot closer to Stowmarket and sort of within the catchment?
I mean, yes, it certainly could be. I think we'll see how things go. Certainly Hadley, because Hadley is the nearest town, and we've just started to make some contacts in Hadley. But we will, fortunately, be able to bring all our members who currently go to Assington, which is great.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Shirley and Francis, for coming along today, because I do think we have a lot of questions. Some came up in earlier discussion of this. So the first thing is, I wonder if we could just get a rough comparison in size compared to the Assington site and this site in Lindsay. Double the size?
So Assington, I can tell you, Assington is 1.47 acres and Lindsay is 4.4.
So quite a substantial difference, so that might account for some of the differences. Because that's what I was really going to get at, is what does 142,000 buy that you need? Obviously, I'm pleased to hear about the rusticated porta cabins. That seems to me very sensible in a beautiful place like Lindsay, Councillor Arthey. But, you know, that's fine. But I just wondered what exactly it is you have to get. I mean, I don't know how much sheep cost.
Not really about the animals.
I know, no. I was
exactly
being a
about
little facetious there. I apologise.
Yeah. No, not at all. No, but it's just, you know, putting on the utilities really is the biggest expense. By far and away, that's really what the bid is.
Does this involve running costs, or is it entirely capital setup and arrangements? I know that that's not necessarily allowed in SIL, but I think it's always worth making sure people are aware of the distinction. How do you manage your running costs? Is that something you've got under control as a registered charity? Because I can see you've got an income. I do apologise, may I carry on, Chair? I've marked a few things from pages 50 and 49 and 50, which raise a lot of the points. We haven't got accounts from the Assington site. Is it possible to make any sort of estimate on the basis of the befriending scheme in totality, like what proportion Assington was of the totality? If that's relevant even?
I wouldn't like to guess. I'd have to ask my finance manager to give you some
Quite right,
figures.
not to guess, that's okay. And the clawback provision is something that the charity is happy to enter into, and obviously, clearly, importantly, you have the funds in your reserves to cover that. Because that's a crucial aspect I'd like members to be aware of, that in the aftermath of the Assington, I think failure is too strong a word, but it has happened. But in the aftermath of that, we have a risk profile to look at, and we have to work out. So this seems to me to cover that, and I think with all those questions satisfied, I'd be happy to support this bid. Councillor Arthey, have you anything further for me?
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Arthey, you want to?
I was just going to add some information to answer your parts of your question. When you look at the application form, you did question perhaps the quantum of some of the costs. Utility installation, that's electricity, water and sewage, is well over £50,000. Right. It's a remote site, so they need a Clargester-style biodigester plant, and they need to get electricity and water to the site. So that is quite a large proportion of the cost. I think it's only fair, I mean, you may well have picked it up in the papers yourselves, but if you haven't, both the planning application and the SIL application were accompanied by a statement from the applicant. And part of that said the project will be overseen by a steering group of local interested members of the community, including representatives from the parish council, local primary school and local residents and businesses. It says we are looking at introducing an associate membership scheme so that the local community can have a voice and be part of the development of the project. I think it's only fair to say that we did go back and ask, has that happened? And the answer is no, but that they will be engaging with the parish council and the local community when they've got the planning permission and the funding in place. So I think that's correct, isn't it? I'm looking at Shirley, really.
We offered to come and speak to the parish council in late spring, I think, to talk about the project and, in fact, introduce all those things, but I didn't actually hear back from the parish council.
You will have an invitation in your inbox when you get home, I think. But I just thought it was because that was in your papers, nobody asked the question, Chairman, but I thought it was useful to actually put that in because it's a question that's been asked of the befriending scheme that they have responded to.
Well, thanks for drawing that to our attention, Councillor Arthey, and thank you for making sure that the invitation to go to the Parish Council is made. First of all, I've got Councillor McCraw, you got one further question, and then Councillor Malvisi, and then Councillor McLaren.
Sorry to do this again. It's just following on from Councillor Arthey's information. Would that be, I mean, I looked at the technical assessment, but actually the information you've provided is in excess of that. The technical assessment, which is part Appendix B, didn't actually contain that information. Actually, I'm wondering that in cases like this, where we're considering future SIL bids, where this might be relevant and an obvious question, if you don't mind my saying, to ask, that it could be included in the technical assessment presented to Cabinet. It's just a suggestion.
That's an interesting suggestion. From memory, I think we used to include the whole application form in the Cabinet papers, and I think somebody said we don't need to have the whole of every application form.
But I think in some instances it might be useful to have some highlights added to the technical assessment, that sort of compromise between the full questionnaire, which I agree with you is probably overly fussy. But I'm just being minorly fussy, Christine, and I do apologise. Is that okay, Councillor Arthey?
Absolutely. I will try to give you a breakdown. In the utility installations, well, I haven't. If you want to, it's not that long. In the section on utility installation, there are sums of 42,000, 7,950, and £3,232, all subject to VAT. They've then got disabled ramps, disabled paths, and car parking. That's about £23,000. There's a porter cabin building, 16,500. A secure farm gate, 1,970, no VAT, and a fully compliant disabled bathroom, just under £7,000. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted some clarification, especially for those who might be viewing us on YouTube. And as Councillor McCraw said, failure is possibly a bit strong. What exactly does Councillor McCarthy mean by failure at Assington?
Okay. Well, when we're looking at SIL funding, we go to great lengths through Christine and the team to ensure that we're putting money into a viable proposal which has life to it. Our minimum requirement, as I said earlier on, is a lease of 25 years, minimum 25 years. The reason for the comment about risk is that those same criteria applied at Assington, and a few years down the road, that lease is being terminated. We provide SIL funding for permanent infrastructure. We don't provide SIL funding for things like tables and chairs. We provide SIL funding for the permanent infrastructure. Oddly enough, some of the permanent infrastructure that we pay for at Assington can now be moved to Lindsay, so perhaps it wasn't quite as permanent as we thought it was. But I think the important thing to remember is that we are looking to the life of a provision being a minimum of 25 years, and given what's happened at Assington, one has to point out to you the caution in the fact that a similar scheme that we have funded has come to an end because of the lease requirements and the lease termination in just a few years. So that is a risk. As I understand it, the person who has granted the lease here is absolutely committed to a minimum 25 years, but it does have the 5-year break clause in it, as did the previous lease. So it is the minimum requirement for us to release SIL funds to community projects.
Fine, thank you. But one has to always bear in mind that if you don't own the land, lock, stock and barrel, you will always run the risk of a break clause, and that's not necessarily the charity's failure. That's possibly the failure of the person that granted the lease in the first instance and not appreciating or recognising just what a service to the community this charity offers.
Okay. I think, though, that it would be wrong if, with a figure as large as £100,000, which is the maximum amount that you can award on and we've only just increased it to 100,000, I think it would be wrong if you weren't made aware of the potential risks, because you are dealing with £100,000 of money that we have collected from developers, which is for the provision of infrastructure, and this cabinet has to satisfy itself with regard to the viability of the project. And if it did fail in 4, 5, 10 years, I think it would be reasonable for people, the general public, to actually look at you, us, and how we made that award.
Absolutely. But I think the use of the word failure is a bit harsh, because they haven't failed. The landlord has failed, but I don't think the charity has failed. Thank you.
Actually, can I just follow up on this? Shirley, is there anything you can tell us about what happened at Assington, and any reassurance you can give us that you're taking the right steps to ensure that there is longevity at Lindsay, and that you will be staying there?
Yeah. I don't know how much I'd like to say about the current landlord at Assington, but what I will say is that our new landlord is not only fully supportive, but has actually written to say that he would not enforce the 5-year breaks at all. So he's written a letter that is legally binding to say that he won't do that. That's how safe and secure he feels about our tenure there.
Thank you for that. Councillor Arthur.
Perhaps just pursuing that same question, I don't know if Christine can help us. I think approaches were made to the existing landlord, but I don't think any significant response was received, or if any.
Thank you. There was a meeting. It wasn't one that my team attended, but it was certainly one that an officer of the council went to. But I don't think there's anything that I could give you tangibly to explain this, and I don't think it would be appropriate to be guessing.
Before I go to Councillor McCraw, Councillor McLaren had her hand up before.
Thank you, Chair. Can I address my questions to Shirley
Yes, of course.
rather than Councillor Arthur?
Yeah.
I just want to get, and Shirley, I've got to confess, I really had to do my homework because I'd not come across your charity before. So I went online and tried to glean. So some of the questions are pretty basic, but I just want to get my head, before we make this decision, I want to get my head behind the charity itself, I think. You are dealing with a wide range of health conditions in your clients, or do you use the word clients or?
To use the word members.
Members, yeah, that's far more respectful, isn't it? So a wide range of health conditions that are being catered for. But you're not subject to any regulatory framework, are you?
Charities Commission.
Okay, but the care that you're providing, because it's called Care Farm.
Yes, the care farm is therapeutic. So
okay. So I couldn't find that on the. Okay. I've got to say I knew the answer really to that, but you're not subject to any regulatory framework. Because of this wide range, I mean, it's really about health and well-being. So that's part of my portfolio, so I'm really interested in this. Do you have any relationship then with Suffolk County Council
Indeed.
and sort of adult social care,
Yep.
SEND, children's service, all of those.
All of those. yeah.
Okay. But my last question, really, we're back to the funding, because you sort of disclosed your bank details or what's in the bank. But how do you fund the charity? What funding is there available to you?
Okay, so since a lot of grant funding finished, I think all charities were encouraged really to become more like businesses, which is what we kind of attempted to do, to become more like a business. And I will say that at the Care Farm, we do have a few little social enterprises. So we have a link with the Angel Hotel. We're supplying herbs, and we have a stall on the market. But actually our main money comes still from funding from trusts. So I spend a great deal of my time writing funding applications. But what we get is spot purchasing from the council. So although the grants per se, the main prevention grants, went some time ago, that's sort of replaced by spot purchasing, and also by members having their own money and deciding how they want to spend that. So that's how we fund the charity. So it's, you know, as many different areas as we can find to fund the charity.
Thank you very much.
Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to return to this question of risk and why I'm a little less concerned about it than I might have been. Whatever we say about the current tenant and Lindsay, Shirley's expressed some confidence in the landlord's intentions for the next 25 years, whether or not the 5-year break clause is or isn't used. The befriending scheme have the confidence and enough confidence to supply the clawback provision in a civil condition. And I think that's the important point, is this is public money. We are here to protect the use of public money and make sure that it doesn't go to any form of, I'm not going to use the word failure, but that's whatever it is. I think we're as protected as we can be, and the befriending scheme are prepared to put their money where their mouth is, effectively. Well, I don't think we shouldn't.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. I've got a quick question for Christine, actually. Utilities connections, is still available to cover connecting utilities in instances like this?
Yes,
Yeah,
that is something that is seen as infrastructure and
Right.
eligible under the SIL expenditure framework.
thank you. I should have known the answer to that. But, thanks for that. Are there any other questions? I know we've kind of strayed into debate with... that's all right, Councillor McCraw. In which case, I'm happy to move into debate. Does anyone want to say anything more that hasn't been covered in questions? Councillor Osborne.
We're in debate, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a risk. With any project like this, there's always going to be a risk, but the benefits to this far outweigh those risks. And if we were to take that into consideration and not approve anything because of it, we wouldn't move on. And services such as the one that the befriending scheme provides wouldn't be there for us. And I appreciate the concerns that the local residents have raised, and I can understand where they're coming from. But, this type of scheme is so badly needed, and it's becoming more and more critical. And actually, I know a case study myself. One of my young residents has used the facility in Assendon for 18 months now. And 18 months, he would not walk out of his front door. He was just a shell. And now he is so confident in himself, he could actually go out now and apply for a job and get it, because he is just a completely different person, and it makes me a little bit emotional to think about it, to see the change in this young gentleman. Yeah. So I support this 150%, and I want to thank you for the splendid work that you're doing with it. You're making a difference to a lot of people's lives. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd like to reiterate that. It's certainly clearly a charity that really does make a difference. And I'm mindful of, obviously, there were some issues with the Parish Council and the local community through the planning process, But I'm heartened the fact that you are going to be working with them. The invitation to the parish council meeting is coming, but working more closely with the community there, I think, is essential to ensure that you become part of that community, and that they can see the benefits of having you there. Councillor Hinton, as chair of ONS, did you want to say anything or have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but any questions I had have already been asked by other people, so...
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to say anything more? Councillor Malvisi and then Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Osborne. To not grant it, I think, is virtually a crime. It's a service that the statutory agencies are failing to deliver, and it is something that will be increasingly required, especially with a cost of living crisis. So I commend that we grant it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Yes, I'm going to continue in the same vein. I think the impact on the people that participate in this scheme, you can't put a price on that for what it does for them and their families, and therefore... Sorry?
Caps 142,000.
I think for families, especially in the situation we find ourselves as a nation, families with members of their family who are having difficulties, whatever that is, if that can be supported and helped, then I'm all for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Adrian Osborne, sitting at the back there, did you actually want to ask anything? I'm sorry, I should have gone to you earlier.
Mr. Chairman, I too has been associated with the problems of Assington, and particular young people that were in Sudbury. And all I can say is my concern was over transport. However, your presentation answered all those questions, and that of Councillor Arthey. So well done, and it's a really good scheme, and I agree with my other councillor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think we all understand the benefit of the befriending scheme, and notwithstanding the circumstances of the departure from Assington, it's clear that there needs to be continuity. They've found a new site. They've overcome all of the obstacles and issues around that site, and I think really we need to proceed with this and wish them well in continuing and expanding at the new site. As Councillor McLaren has said, well-being is an increasing part of the work that we do for our communities, in ensuring that we maintain the well-being of our residents and communities. I know that it is controversial, but it's something that our residents are increasingly expecting of us. So we must make it clear that we're doing everything we can to help and improve the well-being of our residents, because as part of their general health, it's essential, because it ensures that they're less reliant on the services of councils and the health service, and it allows them to lead better lives. So I'm very supportive of this. I think we've got to a stage now where we can go to the vote, unless anyone wishes to say anything more. The proposal here for the £100,000 has been proposed and seconded, so I'd like to open it up to the vote on this item on the agenda, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor McCraw, I take your vote.
In favour.
In favour, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Right, well, that brings us to the close of today's meeting. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Shirley, thank you, Francis, for coming along, and thank you, officers, for your input. Thanks, Christine. And the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, 5th of December at 2 p.m.